This is actually the last workshop slash panel that we're doing of the day, and well, the first actual panel format. And with us today, obviously, we have Fabri and Raza. And really, I want to take the opportunity to explore a couple of things that were really exciting to me about Polygon and Lens, about some opportunities that we have available and that the teams have available for you to get involved with them and more deeply in the ecosystem after this. So I'm really thrilled. That's why we left the best for last of this. I personally have been waiting to ask a couple of these questions over the past couple of weeks and months, because I've really also wanted to see on my end, like, how can we get the community really more involved in the ecosystem after the hackathon? Hackathon at the end of the day is only like 24 hours, 36 hours. But where the real work gets done is, of course, when you can only get a couple of things done at the hackathon, you can do those afterwards. So what I want to know is, like, what opportunities are available for people to get involved afterwards, and specifically as well for students, right? If you want to take your project further, if you not only want to take your project further, but maybe want to get involved more deeply in the ecosystem, what support networks are there, right? And so these are the questions that I'm going to be asking over the course of the panel. We're going to keep it very informal. So if you do have any questions at any point, do feel free to shout out, just interrupt us and ask. And we'll also have time to answer the questions at the end. So we'll probably leave it about 50-50 split between us just asking and talking amongst ourselves, and then leave the rest of the half for questions from the audience. So yeah, I guess both of our panel members have already introduced themselves. But I think, first of all, what I really wanted to ask is just, first of all, the broadest question. Personally, Raza and Fabri, what's your advice for people, coming out of the hackathon to really take their projects further? Maybe you should take it further. Maybe it's a first exploration though. Maybe people are just getting their feet wet. They don't want to take that project further. What should they do next? Both, I guess, in terms of the opportunities that your protocols and networks have available, and also just sort of personally what you feel would be best for a student who's just, maybe a couple of you, this is your first hackathon. For a couple of you, it's, the second one, but most people are not, professional hackers yet. So yeah, I guess we can, start with Raza, since you're right next to me, and then hand over to Fabri next.
Yeah, I think, sometimes it seems like only yesterday I was at uni, but it's been over 10 years. So, and I think that this is probably one of the things I wish would have done more. I think that coming out of a hackathon, let's say you have a project and you're like, whether it made like you want or not, but you're committed to it or you think it's fun, definitely continue building. And I think same would go for Fabri, stay in touch. Like, I'm very approachable on Telegram and on Twitter, so you just reach out. And then it can definitely evolve into something that Polygon starts supporting in whatever fashion. Sometimes it's in a fashion that we just connect you with other partners. Lens is here, and we have a set of other great partners, and we'll connect you, and then you get mixed. You get your role in that ecosystem. It could also be in other times of other forms of resources. In terms of after the hackathon, let's say you want to get involved in the ecosystem. The easy answer is we have an advocate program. Reach out. You get to become a Polygon advocate. Go to events, hold events. You can contribute into the ecosystem. We give you exposure. It's a way to get into the ecosystem and company. And then we have a guild system. So we don't actually have a London guild yet. But a guild is basically a framework that we have that you can apply. You go through the setup, and then basically you become the Polygon guild, which has a range of benefits. But I'll leave it to Fabri to add something to that. Those are some things I can throw out.
And just before that as well, one bit you glossed over very quickly is one of the benefits is getting to go to events.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit more, because I'm sure everybody would love to hear about that.
Talking to Raza now?
Yeah. Well, I guess.
Events.
Raza, you can go first, and then Fabri.
No, okay, just to add events, and then maybe Fabri can add what can you do. I think going to events is super fun, right? You get to go to the places where a lot of networking happens, building happens, protocols, etc. But we're trying to reinvent events itself, bring it at a high value. So I think that going to events is super valuable for you as a young person. You can network a lot, and my connections when I was young brought me a lot. We'll make sure that you get that exposure, and we don't necessarily say, hey, you get fixed to Polygon, but you go to these events. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's
Yeah, exactly. And I think, in terms of also, what Raza was, Raza and I and the rest of the team were chatting about before is like, Polygon are very open, like they're not necessarily tying you to a particular chain. Like it's an opportunity to get involved and like you don't have to feel like you're committing to like just Polygon for the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why we're heavy focus on the Ethereum and EVM ecosystem for a reason. And Web3 still has to grow a lot, like a lot. So if one person enters the space, smart people, ambitious young people, awesome.
Yeah, I will also add like, if you're starting in Web3, probably the first idea is gonna be very bad. So probably the second is going to be worst. Like for me, I have this experience myself. Like after a while, you start like really getting Web3, really getting decentralization. So don't rush it. Experiment a lot first. Like don't try to go like to raise VC funding on your first idea because it's not going to work probably. There is a lot of people that is working and studying Web3 for a long time. So just be patient and experiment as much as you can. Go to the events, brainstorm with people, and eventually you will get an idea. When you have an idea and you incubate that idea for a couple of months and you still are sure that it's a good idea to pursue, then you have, for example, the grants. So Polygon has grants, we have grants. Our grants are up to 15K at first, can be renewed. So right now our grantees are working on creating meaningful MVPs. At this stage, Web3 is so early, like what I say to them is like, crypto is an early industry. So Web3 social is an early niche of that industry. Lens protocol is an early startup of an early niche of an early industry. So if you are building on Lens, really, I mean, there is no much expectations at this point. It's super experimental and early. Probably many will fail. That's the truth of the startup world, of the hacking world. But we encourage to build meaningful MVPs that we can support via grants, like Polygon. And yeah, just build things,
So what does that meaningful MVP mean? For anybody here who's thinking like, I would love that grant, build out my idea. What can I do with that grant? What can I put it towards? Can I put it towards like actually, things that might not be totally technically related? Like, can I put that towards like a little bit of marketing budget? Could I put that towards actually forming the company, for example? Like, what can the grant actually help people with?
Well, what we mean by MVP is like something that works and adds value, in this case for Lens ecosystem or Polygon ecosystem or Web3 ecosystem. But we are trying not to think at this stage in marketing budgets, in investing, in having a community manager or targeting sales and events. So MVPs are work having a proof of concept of the idea that works and get some kind of traction from an early niche. Especially if you have an MVP, you should target like a niche inside this community, so you can get feedback faster and you can create something meaningful for that niche community. When you do that, then you can scale, then you can think about marketing, about sales. For example, I don't know, to quote Web2, Facebook started only focusing on Harvard. Their MVP was in Harvard. So once they get traction in Harvard, they expand to Stanford or whatever, and they expand to the world. So you have to think in steps. MVP is just about the idea and proving the concept. You must have users, then you think about scale.
Cool. So I guess for people who are gonna on Sunday like have a hackathon project, I guess what's the difference between like a hackathon project and an MVP in terms of what Lens would be looking at?
Well, hackathon projects may become a grant. Actually, we are funding a couple of hackathon winners. In 2 days, like a hackathon is only 2 days, so it's difficult to create a working MVP, but a good idea can become very easily a working MVP. If you don't, I will say, being you in your position, like if the hackathon you see it's promising, if you talk with me and I see like there is potential, maybe in a week you can have something working, if it's not today or tomorrow, and maybe then it will be eligible for a grant if it's good. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, I guess Polygon have like a slightly different structured grants program, right? Because you go beyond the MVP as well. Like generally, how is that structured?
Yeah, a little bit similar as well. And I mean, we also have grants, but I guess like taking a different angle, the expectation, and I think Fabrice is the same, the expectation from a hackathon is not to have like, you know, a production grade app. And even, and it's what I said in my talk, is to like focus on a working flow, which honestly speaking is still not an MVP. Like an MVP usually is a little bit more than let's say 1 or 2 working flow. So maybe to add a couple of things. When Polygon, let's say, chooses to invest, they also very much look at, hey, the team, you know, did you think of beyond? Like, if you come in, let me just say like a very extreme example. You come in for a grant and you're gonna, because you want to spend it on marketing, the chances are very unlikely that your product is so good right now that the world needs to hear about it, rather than it needs to be still developed and, you know, there are edges to be like, or things to be defined. So let's say you have a project, you would like to continue beyond the grant. What is your roadmap? What is the problem that you're going to solve? And honestly speaking, if I talk to you and my team, or people in my team are going to talk to you, are they going to give me a feedback? You know, this is a winning team, which at the end is, hey, we want to do this, this, this. We're organized, we're committed, and we're going to make it happen left or right. And then that has content, you know, that comes with a plan, not just a very like passionate voice, but a plan, and you can prove and show things. Then you can definitely like count on support from not only Polygon. We are looking for projects like this.
Yeah, and I guess just out of interest, in the crowd right here, how many people would be interested in funding for their project after the hackathon, or will be at a later date? Just like a quick show of hands. Okay, we've got one. Actually, a lot of people.
As someone who's not listening is like, I'm funding.
Yeah, so most people are interested then in like getting some funding through a project. And I mean, just shout out like, what sort of level of funding you're looking for? Like, how much money are you looking for after, for the, like, at least the beginning of a project? You could just shout out, like, roughly. 8 grand, okay. 10?
If I get 10K, maybe we're 1 or 2 people developing, I would probably outsource key features and try to get that done within the budget, but not with my core members. So the next time I talk to Polygon, say, hey, what did you do with my 10K? Well, we managed to build faster without expanding our team. And so now I showed you what I can do with 10K, give me $1 million.
Interesting. Yeah. And would you say that that's maybe a similar thing for the MVP one? Is the grant to fund the MVP, or do you need to have the MVP first?
No. You can have just an idea. We are also, like Raza said, we are interested in the teams. So actually, if the team is very good, we can give them an idea, because we have like this infinite list of ideas. Yeah. Every day, one more we add to this list. So we are not short on ideas. We are definitely short on great teams. Yeah. So I will say that, and I will say like at this stage, the funding is for development resources or time resources. So you to support yourself while you prioritize these projects, you know, so you don't get distracted with other things, and a grant can make you focus and really accelerate the development of these particular projects.
Okay, cool. So I guess, you know, the resounding key theme from that seems to be the grants will be to help you accelerate development rather than for marketing.
Yeah. Definitely. So if you have, after the MVP, you have traction and you have people using it, like you have to first do things that don't scale. So you have to know the community you're targeting, really know it. Then you will see how you can get to them without marketing budget, without like outreach, just interacting with them where they are. If you don't have that community, you should look for that community first. So first is about community, especially in Web3. Once you have the community, you will see what the needs are, and you can start thinking of a working MVP, and it has to flow organically. So don't think about sales, don't think about marketing. It will emerge itself once you are very deep into a particular niche or community.
I really want to emphasize that, because I've seen communities with several K, 10K, 30K followers, but I don't say it's not worth investing, but you know, it's different. I've seen 100-member communities. I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed. I was at a talk only like I think 3-4 days ago. and they have regular meetups like bi-weekly, but 60 to 70 people show up, and if you look at their follower account, it's like 200. That's to me, it's insane. And also, if you look at how well organized they are, and then if I hear about they actually want to become an incubator, and they actually have local startups, and they manage to like divide the cost amongst 200 people that all want to contribute like 10 to 15 euros. Wow, I'm like that to me blows my mind, and anything that comes out of that will sign.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
So 100 is not a low number.
Yeah, like exactly. Don't think in volume, think in relative traction. Like for example, investors like these KPIs, which are monthly active users. But if you have 100 people in your community and your monthly active users is 90, like you are going to get a big raising fund. Like you have 90% of engagement. So think in those terms and not in bigger terms at first.
I mean, that's really interesting, because one of the questions that I would have asked, and I assume that a lot of people here are thinking about as well, is like, okay, you say that I would, for a 10 or 20k grant, or for X grant, right, for people who are looking at 10 and 20k, then like, what do I need to have, right? Is it that I need to have X number of members in my community, or you mentioned like I need to have a technical roster, right, for my team, right? You're looking at the team. You can come with just an idea because you're looking for strong technical teams. Like, what are the boxes that you want checked when you're looking at one of those proposals that comes from somebody in the audience, for example?
Okay, so I think that obviously that's difficult to answer, but I'm going to go about like more of a framework and method I would do.
Yeah.
So let's say someone comes in and says, I actually had, to give you an example, there was this company who did challenges for, you could do challenges on chain, and then you can reward others as well, and you can get rewarded. But they only had, I think, about 15 paying users. But they had a plan on how to double that by an X time and double that again. And they could show like where they want to do, and also the things they've done that didn't work. And then we just kept in touch, and slowly but surely they're growing. Yeah, we actually only grew by 4 or 6 or 7. And sometimes it bumped even down. And the numbers weren't really that, let's say, impressive, but the way they were tracking and methodological data-driven decisions they were making, that tells you, that there's a plan behind it, and they're making the right adjustments in order to get where they want to be. So I guess like if you ask me what boxes do you need to check, so when I say it's an amazing team, it means that they're well organized and structured. They have a method of tracking, not necessarily reporting, but tracking their data, learning from their data, coming back on it. I mean, I can imagine that you might think, oh, I need like data analytics when I have millions of records, but no, it's not. Like 10, 100, like honestly speaking, at the start, it should be like, do you know your 10, 15, 20 most dedicated users, and what are you doing? Are you doing everything you can to reward them and to make sure they're on your platform? And then like, how does that cycle go and that feedback? So, I think rather than focus on numbers, I'm focusing on what's your framework, method, and way, like where do you spend your effort and attention? Is that thought through? Is that empirical?
Yeah.
And then afterwards, do you also have a plan on how do you scale? Saying, hey, this is doable because I have 20 to 50 users, but I'm planning on when I get 100 plus users, you might hire for customer success. I'm going to hire a community manager so she or he can be at the Discord following up on these kind of things. So I think it's not a number thing, but and then I honestly wish someone would have told me this framework really, someone might think, nah, but yeah, it is this framework which I think I value a lot in these conversations.
Yeah, it also happens to us that we agree on a grant, we agree on an idea, and in the next 2 weeks, the idea totally changed. So this happens a lot. Like the first iteration probably, even for a grant, is not going to be the best one. And we are like, hey, that sounds better. Let's build that instead. Like it's happening every day. So we try to think of kind of a roadmap, but we know that that roadmap is 100% going to change. So you have to be flexible, you have to be experimental, and you have to be open for any possibility. Yeah.
Cool. And so for the people maybe who don't necessarily want to raise funding, so maybe it's split about 50-50 between people who are really thinking about raising some funding for their project versus people who aren't necessarily looking. I guess, what do you think for people who don't necessarily know that they want to have funding yet, but they probably will need it at some point down the line? What do you think your advice would be for them? Because, as you say, right, you come out of a hackathon, your first hackathon project maybe isn't going to change the world, but, a little bit further down the line, your next project will, right? So I guess, what do you think people should be doing, maybe between this hackathon and even the next one, right? What do you think people should be doing to develop their skills, to hone them, and yeah, maybe like continue developing before the next one?
I would say, like, for me, my personal experience was to build something anyway, like without an agenda or a goal. Just I learn by doing. I think everyone here learns by doing. So if it doesn't work, let's build another thing, and then another one after that. That is just for the sport of building, and eventually you will come up with something if you stick with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think building public is a very great advice. I think between now and then is that you got to make a decision if this is, let's say the idea is not good, but you want to keep doing this, invest in your technical skills so you can get up and running much easier. And the only way you're going to do that is by doing, like building. And it's the same like from idea to MVP, like that skill is so valuable. I'm not that good at it, but I've seen people being really good at it, like spinning something up and then coming in 2 nights, and it's hacky as F, but it works. And then they also know what they need to do to make it production grade. And the only way you get there is by building. So I think skills is super important, because if then you find out hackathon is your thing, and that's not a bad strategy, because a lot of great projects that got really well funded came out of hackathons. Then it could be a strategy. Technical skills, you level up, go to hackathons, and then use that as a platform to come up with your idea. If you're in the non-technical skills, I will say it again. I said it in my talk as well. Storytelling, making sure that your product is understood, is way too much underappreciated. I'm not sure if you should call it non-technical. I think it's an aspect in product that is just like missing, and I'm pretty sure it's with you as well. If you see like a presentation in a hackathon that's like really well done and it is a good project, it's like you immediately start thinking, how am I going to help these people like go to the next level? Because they know how to tell the story, they know how to product, they know how to organize, they have to build it. So I think the non-technical, let's call it non-technical, should definitely, if you're here non-technical and that's your role in the hackathon, trust me, you're needed in that team.
That's Raza dropping a couple of hints for tomorrow. Yeah, I think that's that's absolutely right, and sort of coming on to tomorrow as well. And I think what we're really looking to see is like the big vision, how well you can describe it. Ultimately that's the most important thing, and then that's as well what's going to help you as well develop your skills in presenting when you do go for something that is a bigger grant as well. Because at the end of the day, right? Like Fabri at Lens was talking about funding the MVP. Raza's talking about a small size grant. Like the grant is not going to be necessarily like millions of dollars initially. Like if you're looking at 10, 20K, it's like do you have a good project? And then as well at the same time, like how can you execute on that later on? And at the end of the day, it's about telling that story and sharing it as well. So I think at this point, we've obviously really enjoyed talking, and I guess taking up your your suggestions as well of how much you are looking for as well in terms of grants. I'd love actually to sort of not necessarily flip it, so we won't be asking you tons of questions, but turn things into more question-based as well at the moment. So if any of you do have questions about what we said at the moment, I think we can just sort of turn into that, and we can all pitch our different ideas in answer to that as well. So who wants to go first? Yeah, go ahead.
If it's the same idea, yes, you can. If not, you have to think of how to dedicate the time appropriately to each grant.
I mean, technically speaking, you can just like mass apply, but
like doing 2 apps at the same time is tough. Doing one is tough.
And how long does a grant process typically take?
The grant process?
Yeah, I guess for people that you funded, how long did it take them to put it together? And then how long did it take before it was approved?
Well, we have a monthly review, so if you apply, for example, today, the grant is probably going to be reviewed the first week of November. couple of weeks to internally decide which grants are we funding, and so from now to 2-3 weeks you can get your first. We call them milestones. So we create this MVP. To create this MVP, we need to think about 3 milestones. It's an exercise with the team, so we try to think of 3 meaningful features, something that adds value to the MVP, and also forces the team to prioritize, like 3 features. We don't need a list of 100 features. We are going to dominate the world with this application. Everyone is going to use it. No. Just 3 very simple features that is already hard enough. I mean, like less than 10% really complete a simple MVP. So don't underestimate the power of focusing and prioritizing very simple features, because they are really hard already. And when with simplicity is where the magic happens too. Yeah.
Is that similar for the Polygon one too?
Yeah, so we have the Polygon DAO. Submissions go in there. There's a Notion page. You could, like, if someone wants to put a reference, you can put a reference to me, and then you go through the similar process. Yeah.
Cool. Fantastic. Yeah. So I guess it doesn't actually take that long.
Not necessarily. No.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got this question a couple of times today. And I think I replied similar, is that the fact that there's a Starbucks wouldn't stop you if you want to start a coffee shop where you serve coffee and you love it. So Web3 is still like it's not mature yet and it's small. You might start, I don't know, fractionalized, like I presented like a fractionalized real estate, something like that. You have an idea similar. I mean, loads of these ideas are still executed locally, to be honest. And they still will be, because the fact that the technology is so far scary often, so people are like, I still want to deal with a person. So I think, yeah, TLDR, yes. That could be. Yeah, like obviously, like not to get too technical, but I mean, if you have like commitments or you've already had prior funding or something like that, like these are things that we will look at, but not necessarily for a grant. Like those are more like loosely like terms, I would say. But you can imagine that as the amounts go up, like that's a different agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, it matters. We have in our documentation, we have like kind of the priorities right now for the ecosystem. So we take that into account, because, for example, we have certain amount of funding to allocate to grants, and we allocate them. We are very aware of what we think are the most important things to be building right now. So, for example, I don't know, one use case is for Web3 social, maybe gaming, for example. Just an example. And we really believe in social gaming, but maybe right now we are focusing more on creator monetization. This is just a comment, but maybe if we have to choose, we will prioritize one category over the other. But that's our case. We are so early and we are a small team, so we are trying to prioritize. Polygon probably is doing a lot more of things than us.
Yeah, so and what you said made sense, because you also like have a heavy social focus, right? The social, and it is you guys are pioneering there. I guess with Polygon, indeed, to just shed a bit of light, like we're 600 people large and we're still growing. So we have like a whole dedicated gaming set. And you're right, Web3 is so big, like there's so much to do here. So there's a whole gaming department division, NFT metaverse division, like even like societal change and impact, right? That requires an entirely different focus. So I will say no necessarily. What's important is the idea good? What's the execution behind it? Like what do you want to do? Is it feasible? Also, like we are in L2, but not necessarily limiting. Like that becomes limiting maybe if you're like in a dev or infra tooling environment, you want to do maybe something very specific. But I mean, like in most ideas, like I'm gonna assume that's not what you mean. But like anything you want to build, I don't see necessarily a limitation.
Yeah. Also, in every category, there is also always an exception. Like a good project will be recognized and shouldn't have any trouble getting what it needs. Yeah.
Cool. And does with Polygon, obviously, like I think you're wearing the Polygon Studios cap, right?
Yes.
Like, does Polygon Studios have its own separate grants program?
No, we don't necessarily structure it different. So we've got Polygon's DAOs where the grant structure go, and then they can go from formerly Nightfall and ZK are all like separate entities, but it's not necessarily structured like no, not separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And I think we had a question at the back somewhere. Yeah.
So we don't necessarily give preference to one over the other, but I mean at the end of the day, I mean I could tell you right now we have a heavy gaming focus, and it is true. But someone else will come to me with about NFT and metaverse, and I'll say, we'll have heavy NFT and metaverse. It's also true. The fact of the matter is that's why we're scaling so hard. So, and I think that ties back to a question I got from multiple teams, like, where should we focus to build? Is it DeFi? Is it gaming? Like where? And honestly speaking, I kept saying like, okay, we have a focus on Polygon ID, but we have, trust me when I say we want to win in all these corners. So if you come right now, you build a cool game, awesome. If you have like a cool, societal impact project, also cool. So grant-wise, no, not necessarily. Though I think this comes back to what Fabri's saying. If the project looks good, there are generic requirements we're looking at. Yeah, we'll choose it.
Yeah, I would also like to add, like for example, grantees maybe are lacking some kind of resource. For example, they are great hackers, but they are very bad at UX or design. So, for example, in that case, we introduce to them designers, maybe from Aave or Lens. We can help you with UX, or maybe you are missing smart contract dev, so we can introduce you to another one. So we also provide the resources. We try to help you. Of course, we are aligning the objectives, that is to have a successful grant, and we offer any help that we can offer. So in the case of gaming, probably Polygon can introduce you to gaming experts that can help you throughout your grant to think of the idea, to test it, to give you feedback. So it's really like an incubator where you just don't build, but you learn and yeah.
That's a good example because we help in more ways than just giving money. Like often, projects come to us and like, I won't name the partner, but there was this recent project, they had difficulties reaching one of our partners, and we just approached them and connected them. And this often goes a long way as well. Or we provide solution engineering capabilities. So it's like, okay, this is a pretty cool idea, but it maybe came out of a hackathon or something, and then we'll have a couple of solution engineers or one have a look, and then it's like, okay, maybe you've created this in Python or JavaScript or like a higher level language. Maybe you need to opt for a lower level language, help them with going through the SDKs, like whatever makes sense. We actually go to that level of depth of support as well. So yeah, that's probably like good to know. If you want to build like out, we'll commit to from our end as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about the money. Did we have any final questions? Otherwise, I have one. Okay, cool, perfect. Yeah.
How long does it feel like you've been in the space?
Well, like I've been in this job for 2 months, and it feels like a year.
Yeah, it feels like 10 years, and I've been like almost a year. Like, it's wild. I think it's wild how fast it goes, and sometimes it's wild like how to be flabbergasted like where we're at. So I've been in the States for a long time, and now I'm here for a while. And I'm here, and the States feels a lot further than here, and it's so I will say that the level of skepticism still is pretty high in Europe, but at the same time I see like such cool projects where I say, oh wow, this hasn't been built before. Where we're at in 5-10 years, very difficult to say. I do think DeFi is going to take off hard. So if I have to say like somewhere where I think like this is going to go hard, it's going to go fast, it's probably going the fastest. I'm a bit in mind whether that's going to be gaming or whether that's going to be DeFi, because the gaming just gets such a big backlash on projects sometimes, and it's still like so difficult. I've seen it in the entertainment industry as well, like movies that got funded through NFTs. Huge backlash sometimes, and sometimes it's susceptible to some backlash. Whereas with DeFi, it's somehow taking off, and it's a storm, and I just don't see it like we saw the market crash, and it's like, oh yeah, everyone's gonna pull out of crypto, but no, that's also not happening. So I think, yeah, I'd say DeFi is gonna be mass adopted in 5 to 10 years. That's my guess.
Yeah, it's also great that you are so young and interested into Web3, because is the best moment to do it. And you should think in 5 years term or 10 years term. So, for example, from the inception of the internet to having a Uber app, it was like 20 years. So these things takes time, but in 10 years probably we are going to have some version of a very scalable app that is appealing to the masses for sure.
Cool. And yeah, I guess that was nobody else had any final questions, right? Oh, okay, one final question.
Well, grants are small already. So I will say between the smaller of the smallest and the small grant, just to iterate and create something. Maybe it could be some screens, doesn't have to be a working like mobile prototype in React Native. I mean, it's gonna be needed, but maybe just the screens, if you come from a non-technical side, may be enough just to have a great idea with concrete flows, can be good enough, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have a specific use case you're thinking of? Like,
well, in the case of Lens, we are pushing from a developer standpoint, which is building application, building MVPs, and also we are targeting creators. So we are working. There is my other version, which is focusing on creators, and we are bringing Web2 creators to Web3, so we can match them with applications. Yeah.
fantastic. Well, yeah, I think that's all we have time for right now, but Fabri and Raza will be around afterwards, so if you have any questions, feel free to come up afterwards. And yeah, thank you very much for coming. This will be the last panel of the day, and apart from that, we'll leave you to get back to actually coding, and we're looking forward so much to seeing your submissions tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.